Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Underrated Movie Podcast. This is a podcast where we discuss films that are underrated, underappreciated, and ones that have slipped under the radar and passed most people by. I am your host, Derek McDuff, and joining me today, I have a special guest, my buddy JMO. How's it going, JMO?
It's going so good, Derek. I'm so excited to be on your show and to be talking about Popstar. It's going to be a good day.
Yep, this is gonna be a good one because, as you mentioned, we are talking about the film today, Popstar Never Stop Stopping, the 2016 mockumentary musical comedy film directed by Akiva Schaffer, Jerome Taccone, starring Andy Samberg, and the film is actually written by the three of them, who are together known as the Lonely Island, who people might be familiar with. But before we get too far into that, JMO, why don't you let the people listening know who you are?
Awesome. Yeah, I would love to. So I'm JMO. I am one half of the old Switcheroo podcast. My lifelong friend Mike and I are trying to research and review and sort of poke fun of lovingly at every game in the Nintendo Switch Online catalog. There's over 250 of them, so we're covering Super Nintendo, Sega Genesis, the Game Boys, just a lot of really cool games from the 90s and early 2000s. And one of the things that I really like about it, much like your podcast, Derek, the Underrated Movie Podcast, it's not hard to rent a movie digitally these days if you don't have it on one of the many streaming services. Like for this one we did for this episode, I rented it for like $4, right? So anyone can just, with a very low investment, follow along with your podcast. Can you listen to an episode about a movie you've never seen? Do you do that?
I don't usually. I usually will try, unless it's something like Geostorm or something where I'm like, I don't know if I'm going to watch this movie.
Yeah. So I'm the same way. I'm like, I want to have seen the movie so I can get the jokes of what they're talking about. And much like your show, it's very easy to access the movies most of the time. With Nintendo Switch Online, most people have at least a base level subscription if they have a Switch. So if it's a Nintendo or SNES game, we want people to play along and we want people to come on and like guest host with us. We kind of want to turn this into a podcast for the people, much like yours, your underrated backlog. It's the gift that keeps on giving, dude.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I mean, and speaking of gifts that keep on giving, I didn't even know about that whole Nintendo Switch Online thing until
It's
I came on your guys' show and talked about Pokemon Snap, and I was like, oh my god, this game I haven't played for years. So I ended up
yeah.
getting the full subscription and buying a Nintendo Switch N64 controller just to play these games because of you guys. So thank you so much for giving me that gift. I really appreciate it.
It's very, you know what? It's the Nintendo Switch Online service is underrated. Like
Yeah.
it's got a lot of cool stuff for not a whole lot a year, and people just don't know about it because it's not like a retro movie like you do. It's a thing right now.
Yeah, yeah. And, I will say that, obviously I mentioned I've been on your podcast and it was a blast. I've had, the other half of your podcast, Mike, on here, but this is the first time I'm getting you on. I'm so excited to have you on. We met in real life at WonderCon. We're going to be hanging out at Comic-Con a little bit next week for us, but it'll be in the past for the listeners. Time travel with podcasts is weird like that. But, since this is your first time, I gave you my big old list of movies I wanted to cover, and you were like, you know what? We don't want to stop stopping. Let's talk
Oh,
about Popstar. So
never stop stopping.
why was that the one that you zeroed in on my big old list of movies?
So your big old list of movies, right? I'm going through it and I'm looking for, okay, let's watch or let's listen to episodes for movies that I think are underrated. And I've listened to your Big Fish, The Frighteners, Super Mario Brothers. It's so many movies I've stepped out of and felt like, did we see the same movie? I read the
Yeah,
reviews later. I'm like, and look, Popstar, it's not a masterpiece, okay?
right.
But this movie was so universally trashed,
Mhm.
right? And it's got this kind of second wind. It's got sort of a cult following in recent years. But I just loved it the moment I saw it in theaters. I saw it in its first theatrical run, or its only theatrical run. And I just remember laughing so much harder than anyone else in the theater.
Mhm.
And I was just like, why are you guys not laughing at this? It's hilarious. And so I'm excited to talk to you about it because I just think, the movie's underrated because I think the comedy is underrated.
Yeah, I really agree with that. I think it did okay with critics. Like it got like I just looked it up a Rotten Tomato score about 79, which but I think it was a lot of middling reviews. It was a lot of
Yeah,
people being like, "Yeah, this is funny." Like whatever. Like, it was a lot of like lukewarm
right.
responses. And like I said, it's not like a perfect movie by any it's not like this is Spinal Tap or something like that. But I think it is a lot of fun and it really is a great parody for somebody who I watch a lot of docs. I'm a big
Yeah.
documentary fan, and this really hits those beats pretty spot on. I will say this movie, while like I said, did okay critically, people seem to kind of lukewarm like it. It did not do well at the box office. It made
Right.
like not. It didn't even crack double digits in terms of millions of dollars, and that is insane.
Yeah.
And I think a big part of the reason for that comes from the fact that this is it like I said, it comes out in 2016 and it's a Judd Apatow movie, and that feels like, those movies dominated the aughts, right? Your Super Bads and your Talladega Nights and all that stuff. They were
He
huge.
knocked up. He did knocked up, right?
He did, yeah, he did Knocked Up. So like a
Yeah.
lot of those ones where it's just like, and I think I think he did I got to double check, but a movie that is referenced in this, Forgetting Sarah Marshall, which I love that line where it's just like, "Oh, Sarah Marshall, you
I
gotta
have
forget
to
her,"
forget. So
because
dumb.
like when he takes on, he does really look like Jason Segel. I thought that was pretty good, but this feels like it comes out when that era is starting to wind down. Like we don't really get those big dumb Judd Apatow movies very often anymore, if ever. And
Yeah.
this was when they had enough juice that they were making them, but not enough juice that they were still making money at the box office.
Yeah, I feel like this movie came out at a very unfortunate time
Mm,
culturally because, like you said, the Judd Apatow movies, dominated the early 2000s in terms of what is a comedy movie. The Lonely Island debuting on SNL with their what was it called, Lazy Sunday, the
oh yeah, yeah,
Chronicles
yeah.
of Narnia rap, that took the world by storm.
Mhm.
And then you had like a series of other ones. You had like Dick in a Box and stuff like that. And when this movie came out, it had been 5 years since their last hit. It was the Jack Sparrow song where Michael Bolton keeps cutting in and talking about Jack Sparrow instead of the sexy club music.
Yeah.
Um, so it's sort of like if this movie had come out at the height of Lonely Island fever,
Mhm.
I think it would have seen a much bigger audience at the box office. But yeah, it made like 9 million on a budget of 20. It's really bad.
Yeah, which means they probably all told spent about 40 when you factor in like marketing and stuff like that. So
Right.
it was a big and a lot of times you can be like, well, they probably made it back on the like back end, eventually through DVDs and streaming. Like this is like you said, you can still rent it. I watched it on Peacock, whatever. But like that's a big deficit. So
Yeah.
who knows? And it reminds me a lot of a movie I talked not too long ago about Walk Hard, another kind of music comedy, parody comedy. That
Yeah.
one wasn't a mockumentary, but still that was more of like parodying a biopic than a music doc. But
Right.
it's a lot of the same. It's it's another Apatow one. It's another one of this like John C. Riley probably wasn't as big then as like Will Ferrell or somebody like that, and Andy Samberg. He wasn't his heights of when he was on SNL and this. People still know Sandberg, and there's a lot of celebrity cameos in this. But I don't.
51, according to Screen Rant.
Oh wow, okay. And but some of them, I'm just like, I was watching this, I was like, is that Emma Stone? Is that Weird Al Yankovic? Like they're like really subtle, like in something you kind
Yes.
of like have to like blink and you'll miss, and like it takes like a movie buff to like sometimes catch them. So yeah, I don't know. Just a big bombastic swing, but it has become kind of a cult classic, or at least it seems like
Right.
it's on its way. I don't know. Do you agree?
I mean, absolutely, because I think this movie, it's almost better watched piecemeal on YouTube.
Mm,
A story from start to finish, it there's not much of an arc here, and there's not
mm,
supposed to be.
right.
This is a 90-minute comedy. And you said earlier, like, these big dumb, I think I said Apatow movies. That's not an insult. Dumb comedy is a genre of comedy
Yeah.
where very story light, very no real tension to speak of, and we're gonna shotgun you with jokes, right? It's gonna be
Mhm.
Homer's shotgun makeup gun that he shot Marge with.
Eh,
It's like, are they all gonna land in the right place? Absolutely not. But when you get 10 jokes in 5 minutes, you're probably gonna be smiling. You mentioned this is a mockumentary,
mhm.
and I was wondering if this movie would have done better comedically if it felt like there was a cameraman following him around, like shaky cam style. And then, because I was like imagining like the famous wolf attack, and if the camera had felt like it was in danger, would it seem more chaotic and funny if this had really felt like a documentary instead of like just the celebrity interviews interstitched between SNL skits? You get what I'm saying?
Yeah, do feel like it did still give me those vibes, I gotta say, because watching it, I was like, okay, this actually feels like it's using the documentary, well, the mockumentary format fully, where it's like, other than I think like a couple seconds of the opening credits when they use the people's actual names, it feels like this is a fake documentary about this fake person as opposed to something like Walk Hard, which is just like a movie set in this world. And I think that compared to something like The Office or something, I get why this exists, like The Office, which I love, don't get me wrong, or even to take that even further, say Parks and Recreation, which is something
Right.
that uses the mockumentary format, but there are no camera people, like there is no reasoning for that on a level other than it's just a style or another one, let's say Modern Family, another
Right.
show that uses the cutaways, uses but like no one ever acknowledges the cameras. It's not being made for anything. At least The Office kind of goes into the last season like, okay, like the show is now premiering, even though it's
Right.
ridiculous that they would be making it for 9 years or whatever. But this feels like this is a documentary. It's just a fake one.
Yeah. And so I guess it's ultimately based on how this movie ends. So we do we go full spoilers? We do, right?
Full spoilers, yeah.
Full spoilers. I think for a movie that came out in 2016. Uh,
That no one saw.
so so I mean, one of the more heartwarming parts about this movie is that, in the beginning you think you're watching a documentary about the downfall of Connor for real,
Hmm.
right? It's like this is where his career fell apart,
Hmm.
and then
This
you
is gonna
realize
ruin
at
the
the end.
tour. What tour? The world tour.
Well, okay. So this being so relevant with celebrities and
Mhm.
things, like you mentioned Justin Timberlake's recent collapse.
Mhm.
I think it's time for a sequel. I want a Connor
Yeah.
for Real pop star sequel
Mhm.
because so much has happened in the world of pop culture that kind of needs to be riffed on, like the Amber Heard trial,
Mhm.
Justin Timberlake thing, even like the whole Taylor Swift marrying a celebrity, or excuse me, a sports star.
Yeah.
I think there's another pop culture story to be told here. Did you have a favorite celebrity cameo? Because like you had mentioned, Weird Al is
Mhm.
Hammerleg, never sings a single song, never makes a
Nope.
single joke. You're just like, wait, I recognize that voice.
Yeah, I really love that because I love it. Was like, yeah, the two I brought up, they have Weird Al and Emma Stone cameo in this movie. You would
Right.
not guess which one is the one who is the singer in the cameo. It's both uncredited.
Emma Stone, okay, but Turn Up the Beef, that song kind of slaps. Like, did
It
you get it?
I did. I listened to the whole soundtrack for this. It's good. I'm like, oh wow, is she like a Haley Steinfeld where she's actually secretly a great singer?
It's the funniest thing about all these mockumentaries about music
Mhm.
groups is that the music is always legit good. This is Spinal Tap is good rock.
Mhm.
The stuff from this movie that Lonely Island created is catchy and it's well produced and it's like I enjoy it musically. Have you seen A Mighty Wind? Are you familiar with that one?
No, for guest, right?
Christopher Guest,
I
right?
have
He was
not.
the. It's good. It's good, and it's
Okay.
folk music.
Okay.
But that was a big movie when I was growing up. In fact, I have an autographed. They recreated that concert from the movie
Uh-huh.
and with the real actors, and because they all perform their own music. It's like these people are so blessed to be funny and musically talented. It's not fair. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like I know I that means I should be able to play guitar.
Right? Like, come on now. I mean, I can play a little ocarina, but that's about it?
But a real ocarina. Wait, did you learn ocarinas like actual how to play one after Zelda?
Oh, absolutely. It took me like a day. Those things are very easy to learn how to play, but I
Okay,
definitely
okay.
did because of Zelda. I had like I think I still have it, like a little pendant one that I used to wear around because I'm a big
Do
old
I
dork.
have your permission to humble brag? Because if I'm gonna humble
Absolutely.
brag, it should be about in a discussion about a movie with a song that's literally humble bragging the whole time. I'm so humble.
Yes.
So my two favorite celebrity cameos in this, the first one is just it just amuses me, the Seal one.
Mhm.
So when Connor is trying to get a boost in publicity and decides to propose to his girlfriend, he has Seal perform,
Mhm.
and he sings like actually a pretty cool like remix of the Mona Lisa song, but
Yeah.
changes to Ashley Wednesday. And then Seal's music is so powerful it causes these novelty wolves he bought from Party Wolves on Yelp to lose control, and the wolves start destroying the wedding, and they run to like an escape vehicle, and then Seal's like, I can handle this. I've been through this before. What do you think? I got these scars. And
Yeah.
Connor's just like, from seals, man.
Oh, he says from wolves. He says from
Uh,
wolves,
Oh,
right?
did I say seals?
Yes.
Yes, Wolf got his scars from seals.
I was like, okay, that would be interesting. That's how he got the name. He's like Batman. He's like, they traumatized me, so I became one of them.
So, but anyway, the one of the funny punchlines is that the news chyron going across the bottom of the screen is full of little jokes, and there's little like headlines in the
Mhm.
background of this movie. And so when Seal gets almost killed by wolves because of Connor's negligent Yelp spending, I guess, he sues Connor and then gets engaged to Ashley Wednesday. She leaves
Yeah.
him for Seal,
Who's
right?
played
And so
by
my
Imogen Poots, by the way, who has the best name in Hollywood, and I love it whenever I see her in the credits.
And so I get a little chuckle about Seal stealing Connor's girl, to use a trite phrase, because my wife caught Seal lurking on her Instagram one night. And I'm like, I'm on to you, Seal. Like, but so that's my humble brag. My favorite cameo is Ringo because
That's what I was gonna say. Yes, yes, go,
yeah.
go, go, go.
Oh, okay. Well, I mean, that's I think one of the best punchlines in this whole movie is that
Mhm.
he has this equal rights song where he's simultaneously arguing for marriage equality and trying to make it super clear that he himself is not gay.
Yeah.
He's just an ally and not, not homophobic at all. Of course not, even though he tells you he's not gay like 50 times.
Mm.
And so it's like this whole extended sequence. And then after the song, it cuts to Ringo. And hold on, I actually wrote it down word for word. He says, like, he's talking about marriage equality like it's not allowed. It's allowed now. Like, we
It's allowed
came,
now, and he just
yeah,
does it because it's Ringo fucking Starr. Really, like it's like they got one of the Beatles in this movie, and they just give him this. I burst up. That is the funniest line in the movie. In a movie
yeah,
that is very funny. So I agree. Of all the like celebrity cameos playing themselves, that's my favorite one. I also, like I said, love Emma Stone. I think, I also love all the TMZ stuff, or it's called CMZ. Like, it's so accurate. It's
yeah,
so, because they're just like the dregs of society, and they just, all those actors are hilarious. You've got a lot of like great people who are like, you're like, oh, that's Lauren Lapkus, but like people on the street might not know who Lauren Lapkus is, but they recognize her. But it's that part was really great. And then I think the funniest human being on the planet Earth is Bill Hader. And when he does that whole flatliners shtick, where he's just like, yeah, I got really into flatliners, the Joel Schumacher movie. Like, it is just that it has nothing to do with anything. It is not relevant to the plot with anything, but it's just Bill Hader, and it's just like, and by the way, I think that's Andy Samberg's wife who is a cameo in that scene too.
that's
She's the one.
hilarious.
He's like, did I shit my pants? She's like, not this time. So I don't know. Like, it's brilliant. Like, there's so many jokes in this movie, and like you brought up, this is something that it feels like just kind of interconnected sketches, and the
Yeah,
plot doesn't matter a lot,
no, not at all.
which makes it feel, even though it's not technically an SNL movie, it basically is, because
Yeah,
when those SNL movies would come out, they would like be a popular sketch or whatever, and they would make a feature length thing of it. A lot of times they're good, not all the time, but it's one of those things where it's like, okay, how do we get this guy who's just Wayne's talking in his basement to the screen? How do we make that
right,
into a whole movie? And it kind of becomes the similar thing. And this is basically a SNL adaptation of just their digital shorts they would do. Like you said,
right,
Justin Timberlake featured prominently or not prominently, but he's featured a lot in this. Obviously, they were friends from Dick in a Box, and even the character of Connor for Real feels partially based on Justin Timberlake and kind of
yeah.
how he left In Sync and stuff like that. So yeah, But I think that this one, it's so funny, but I think that it doesn't really make sense. The economics didn't really work at the time because of the way we've seen things trend to comedies going away, because jokes are a really hard thing to translate. Like, things that
Yeah.
are really funny in this movie might not make sense in China or France or something like that.
Yeah.
So and because movies now have to make at least half their money internationally, that's why these kind of movies, I think, aren't hitting any longer, and why they're not getting made, because rather than making 25%, 10% at the foreign box office, you got to do half of it.
It's interesting to hear you say that because like I almost wonder how much that's influenced our culture and our approach to one another. I'm getting a
Mhm.
little weird. Okay, I'm getting political every episode, but like comedies, like you said, it feels like it's a dying art form
Mhm.
because comedy to my students, and by the way, if you're listening to this, stop, you're eavesdropping. Okay, I'm going to talk about some very weird scenes in a minute. Okay, and I don't want to be held accountable for that. It's TikTok. It's bite
Mhm.
size. It's 15 seconds long. That's what's funny to people. And to make a movie, a comedy movie where you're spending millions and millions of dollars, it's just very risky from a financial standpoint now because of how people get their chosen free comedy 15 seconds at a time anytime they want it. And I almost put comedy and horror in the same category
Mhm.
because it's when a horror movie isn't scary, it's awkward for the viewer. When a
Mhm.
comedy movie isn't funny, it's awkward for the viewer. So you're trying to literally make the person lose control. You're trying to make me scream or laugh out loud. That's such a powerful emotion. It bursts out of us. And it was really funny. I watched this with my co-host Mike and my dad via Zoom. That's what we did during the pandemic. We would have family Zooms and watch movies all at the same time, and
Nice.
just
Yeah.
3, 2, 1, play. Did you ever do that? Did you have a movie night?
Oh yeah, we that was like a thing in the pandemic where it would be either like screen sharing, or like a lot of times I would do it with some friends, or like, somebody I was seeing at the time would do like a screen share thing,
Yeah,
or like just like, okay, and go. It'd be like, when you're turning the keys on the submarine to like launch the nuke.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we did that for this one, first time in a long time, just because it was sort of an impromptu, like, hey, you anyone want to join me watch this? And I was laughing so much more than Mike and my dad were.
Mhm.
But that turns out they liked it. Like I think they gave it like a 6 and a 7 out of 10. And so I guess what my point is that I wanted to watch this with somebody because when comedy hits and you're laughing along with somebody, I think it's so much more enjoyable. And I felt like I was laughing along with the makers of this movie. They seem to be having so much fun on set making this.
Yeah, I think that is absolutely right. Because I did watch this alone, and honestly, I was watching it and I was thinking of last time I had watched it. I watched it with my brothers, and I was like laughing a lot. But when I
Yeah,
watched it with them, we were dying. Like,
dying.
because there is something about that shared experience, like you said, of comedy or horror. I think that you're not the, you're very spot on when you're saying that horror and comedy are very similar, because they just get this. It's not a cerebral thing; it's a very instinctual, deep-seated primal thing where just this emotion comes out of us, whether it's like fear, we're like, ah, or it's comedy, we laugh. And like, I think that's why, for example, one of our best horror filmmakers working today is Jordan Peele,
Mm,
someone
yeah.
who started in comedy, because he understands that the beats in comedy are very similar to the beats in horror. And I just recently saw, as of this recording, A Quiet Place a couple weeks ago, like opening
Mm,
weekend when it first came out, Quiet Place Day 1. And I saw that in a packed theater, in a Dolby theater, by the way, because I'm like, sound is so important. I want to see this in a Dolby. And I actually went alone. I didn't know anybody there, but it was still so cool because I was just getting off work, went to go see a movie, and the person sitting right next to me, there was this woman who was so fucking scared whenever anything would happen, and it elevated the experience exponentially for me. Like, a monster would come, she's like, oh my god, like, it was so good. Like, I made it such a blast. And comedy, that shared experience, it really, really brings something out in you. And so, I guess then, because we talked about you watching it, we talked about all these things behind the scenes and stuff like that. What do you think about the kind of the meat of this movie, the crux of it? What's your overall opinion on it?
and you mean in terms of the story or just this movie as a product?
Yeah, I guess this movie as a product, like overall, what are your, like? Yeah, it doesn't have to be story, because like we said, there's not too much in terms of the story, but
Yeah, yeah. I mean, because basically the plot is that Connor, our main character, our Justin Timberlake, becomes
Mhm,
estranged from his former friends, and this is the story of his solo career tanking to the point that he reunites with his friends, and it's kind of way more fun that way anyway.
mhm.
And when I seeing the documentary footage of them just being friends together and playing pranks on each other and just kind of knocking elbows, it felt so genuine that it's almost heartwarming.
Right.
And this movie, like we said, it occupied a very strange place in time. The DJ using an iPod, I thought was pretty wild, because I was like, this was before iPhones were so
Right.
ubiquitous that like you would use an iPod,
Mhm.
and I'm sad to say, one of our favorite jokes, your favorite punchline, the Ringo Starr being like, he's talking about gay marriage like it's not allowed. It's allowed now. Well,
Mm, yeah.
this country has seen a big push away from, marginalized groups having rights. So like what if we rewatch this in a few years and that's not allowed anymore? And it's like,
Right, it'd be like, I'm just like, "Oh, are things gonna start becoming dated in the other direction now?" Like,
right? That kind of chilled me a little bit.
yeah.
So as much as I think this style of humor and some of the jokes might not age well and get sort of lost to time, I
Mhm,
think that this movie having such a genuinely good soundtrack
mhm.
means that in some ways it will outlive a lot of other comedy movies if it can find an audience, if people start talking about how good. In fact, can we talk about the song list? Because
Yes,
I kind of
please.
want I wanted to go through it because to me that's the highlight of this movie. What's the meat of the
Mhm,
movie, the crux of it? It's you're really waiting for the next funny song to
mhm.
pop up. And I was laughing reading just the track list off of Amazon. Like you have things like Turn Up the Beef featuring Emma Should I Move featuring Akon. Did you listen to that one?
I
Should
did.
I move? And this whole song is like he lives in a mansion, but there's a
Mhm.
slightly larger mansion he kind of wants. And
Yeah,
like, I mean, that was funny then because oh my god, he's so rich. But now that real estate has become, pure gold,
right.
it's even more establishing Connor as just this rich, spoiled, out of touch person.
Mhm.
I think my favorite title is "Things in My Jeep" featuring Linkin Park.
Oh, yeah. Because I didn't realize that was Linkin Park until I looked at
Well,
the track list, and I was like, "Oh, Linkin Park, okay, that's
and
wild."
this was before the lead singer passed away, right? Isn't this
Yeah, yeah,
the
yeah.
yeah the original band? And they're in there. Pink, has the equal
Mhm.
rights song. Like the celebrity cameos and the music sampling from other artists is just really genuinely good. But the things in my Jeep joke, I think that might be my favorite punchline because it's the what was his name? Lawrence? Is Lawrence the one who becomes the farmer?
Yes, yes, yeah.
So Lawrence, after the band breaks up over the dispute of who wrote the catchphrase verse in "Turn Up the Beef," he goes off and starts a solo career, but it doesn't land with anybody. And he's just listing off like, chapstick, spare tire, gum, and he's like, "These are the things in my Jeep." And then it cuts to Nas, and he goes, "I couldn't connect to that song. I have different stuff in my Jeep."
That was so good, and, oh, man, because yeah, I think that, like you say, some of the, like, more specific things, like a reference to Forgetting Sarah Marshall or Justin Timberlake, like, things, as we've seen, people, a younger generation don't really recognize Justin Timberlake anymore, so those things might not age well and might be forgotten, but the
Like
song.
the cop didn't recognize him.
Yeah, yeah, that's exactly what I was implying. Yeah, but the songs just being so universally funny, like the humble one, and like all these other ones you mentioned, they are so just funny that I think because of that, no matter what, that even if some of these more specific references to Seal or fighting Martin Sheen, which by the way is so fucking funny, those might not hit, but it's just like some of these things are just so really funny and universal, and you can, like you said, you can really tell these three dudes are friends. And when they do
Yeah.
that song about Glenda or whatever, like Sick Glenda, that's never gonna get old. That is never going to be like not culturally relevant anymore. It's a deeply just like, oh yeah, you like have a crush on somebody, and it's just like, oh no, I can't hang out. It's so, that is why I think that it has grown in its cult status over the years, and It would be really cool to see a sequel. I don't think it's going to happen. I read the most useless part of a Wikipedia I've ever read, by the way, today when I was like looking up information for this article, and it was like potential sequel, and it was like I can't remember who, but it was like one of the stars said a sequel is not planned, but it's not off the table. I'm like, that is why you even put that on the
Yeah,
Wikipedia article. But yeah, so it's just like I would love to see it, but with it like being such a huge bomb, I don't think it's going to be the case. But clearly, it does resonate with people who watch it.
right. Yeah. The sick Glenda. I was also
Like
on my
Glenda.
song notes, and it's fun too because at this point in the movie, Connor's solo career has completely collapsed,
Mhm.
and now he's reunited with his friends at the farm. And at first, they can't remember the lyrics; they just remember the bit da 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 da
Mhm.
da da, right? And then together they start to remember. And was that moment earned? No. For this to be like, oh, the friends are getting back together,
Mhm.
but it hits, and it's fun, and it's heartwarming to see them remember the lyrics. Glinda, are you dying or just avoiding me? Either way's a bummer, but I hope you're dying.
Good. It's so good. Honestly, there's like so many times in this movie where you're like, okay, I've seen a lot of parodies, I've seen a lot of fake docs or whatever. I know they're gonna zig, and then they totally just zag, and you're like, oh, okay, like it went a different way.
Did you? It kills me too. Talk about going in a different way.
Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah.
Lawrence, they reunite. They bury the hatchet
Mhm.
with like the worst apology ever. The worst apology ever. Where
Mhm.
Connor, if I can paraphrase it, is that lame?
No, no, no.
Right. He says he's telling the Lawrence, "You're mad at me because I didn't give you credit for co-writing the catchphrase verse. Fine, you helped with the catchphrase verse, and you wrote most of it using my catchphrases that you also wrote entirely. But I was in the room. I was late. I was late that day. There was traffic. There was no traffic. I lied. I overslept on purpose. Um, but once I was there, I put in the time to help. I left a little early. I remember that. I remember I wasn't there. I wasn't there. And it's just Andy Samberg flawlessly delivering this 3-minute monologue as he
Mhm.
slowly realizes what an a-hole he is. And there's this phrase from South Park. I don't know how you feel about South Park humor, but
Generally
there's a
like it.
line. There's a line where Kyle's talking about the mental gymnastics that Cartman has to go through to not utterly hate himself. He
Mhm.
needs to contextualize his reality so much that whatever he does is forgivable. And this is Connor, for the first time in his life, picking through all the excuses he built up for himself until finally, and Lawrence is not saying a single thing this whole time. It's Andy Samberg
Mhm.
just talking to himself, breaking it down, and then that's it. That resolves it. They hug it out. And then Lawrence is now a weed dealer. Not, excuse me, a grower. He has a
Yeah.
farm. And he's like, let's have a great harvest, everyone. It's the sprawling thing. Did you catch, though, the joke with the names?
No, I don't think so.
So if you go back at the weeds, I missed it until I was preparing today
Mhm.
for this episode. So the weed strains he grows all have funny names. Oh, this is Purple Godzilla. This is Postpartum Depression. This is Dolly Parton. This is this is Frog Jizz.
That one I remembered.
But did you notice that that's not that's
It's just a
this
jar. It's just a little jar. I did see that. Okay.
no, but it's a jar, but it's not of weed.
No, I saw it. Yeah, it's a little just jar of viscous fluid.
Which means it's the name of the strain. That's just what's in that. I don't know, man. It's just like for a comedy to be as funny as this was for me on the second viewing,
Mhm.
it's kind of like a horror movie. Once you know when it's going to jump out, once you know how it ends, a lot of the tension is gone. A joke is never as funny the second time you hear it.
Yeah, yeah,
So the fact that this held up so well and that I'm still discovering little jokes in it, I was like,
yeah,
this movie has a lot of quality that others aren't acknowledging, I think.
yeah. There's a lot of subtle humor in it that, like you said, you won't notice the first time. That's kind of like my favorite kind of humor is stuff that isn't pointed out. It's not when they're not like, "Hey, look at this. This is really funny." When you're just like, "Oh, that's actually hilarious." You notice it in the background. And it's like you said, even just like the little ticker at the bottom of that, like news coverage, stuff like that. It's so funny. And somebody who we haven't really talked about at all, who I think is just hysterical is Chris Redd, who plays Hunter the Hungry, because he's just a psychopath. He's so insane in this whole movie, and it's like he does feel like somebody who actually would maybe exist in like the record industry, because these people get like so disillusioned. You hear all these insane stories about all these like crazy rappers and stuff like that, and he's just his eyes. He's really selling it with his eyes. Like, yeah, I don't know. What do you think?
Hunter the Hungry, that is way too much an actual like name for a rapper. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
And even his songs are good on the soundtrack.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Yeah.
Chris Red, I think it's him performing it. You know, he can do a good beat. He has one of my other favorite jokes in the movie where he's like rapping and the lyrics are all work and no play makes Hunter go crazy. All play and no work makes Hunter just as depressed.
I think I caught that. Oh, that's so good.
It's
Oh
just
my
it's
god.
every character in this movie has moments like that. They're really funny.
Mhm.
And the big, the big thing I think this movie's biggest swing and miss is the prank where it makes it look like he has no genitals,
Yeah.
right? He was tucking to do this costume change and then he was naked because they got I don't even know how Hunter did that. I don't know
Yeah.
how you sabotage it to take all of your clothes off of you. But I did find it funny. There's the conundrum of like he wanted to show that he had genitals, but he can't do that.
Right.
It's
Yeah.
like
He's like, it's such a what is it? What does he say? It's like such a
it's such a
conundrum.
conundrum. This is such a conundrum. But I also really like when Hunter is defeated by Harry the agent,
Yes.
and Tim Meadows like slaps him upside the head. Which again, this predates the Will Smith slap by what 10 years practically.
Yeah.
But he slaps Hunter for being really disrespectful, and then like he turns to the other guys, and he has this face like, "Oh my God, this is his agent who just slapped Hunter the Hungry," and it's just so funny the expressions that these actors have.
Hmm.
I kind of feel like you could watch this movie on mute and still be laughing at the expressions, and also like the backup dancers are really good. Like the choreography in this movie doesn't even get talked about.
Right. And I think that, yeah, talking about the choreography and like the physical comedy in this, like if you go back and watch a lot of those like old classic comedians, like the Marx Brothers or the Three Stooges and stuff like that, people who started in the silent era, a lot of the reason those comedies hold up better than stuff that would come out 20 years later is because of the cultural stuff. Like it's stuff that from the 50s is kind of like not relevant, or it's really dated, or it's like a racist, whatever. But like stuff that was just like when they were doing silent stuff, it's all just Buster Keaton doing physical comedy. House
Yeah.
falling on him is there's no cultural barrier to that, and I think that the physical comedy in this, like we talked about with a lot of the music and stuff like that, is something that holds up really, really well.
Yeah. 100%, 100%. The I think every comedy like this, it needs
Mhm.
that moment where the joke goes so much farther than you thought it was
Yeah.
going to go. And for me, that's the autograph scene. When they are smashed in the limo and a woman is pressing her naked body against the glass and Connor's bragging about it. And then a guy asks to be autographed downtown.
Mm.
And I mean, this is an R-rated movie. That's also hurts, the movie's takeaway. Like
Yeah.
every time you choose to have it, I'm very curious. Did Deadpool get a rating yet? As of recording,
I
Deadpool comes out in
think
like a
I
couple
think it. I'm
weeks.
pretty sure it's R. I'm pretty sure.
That'd be surprising to me because you're saying no to a lot of money when you make your movie R. When you go across that line and now you're saying, okay, you have to be a certain age to see it, your movie's gonna make X less amount of dollars.
Right.
Yeah, but just that it just made me laugh like a middle school kid again. I really feel like there's room in my heart for immature humor. I don't know. It tickles a funny bone that I don't think gets tickled very often anymore.
Right. It's a lot of the stuff, me trying to be like being like I'm like a film critic and stuff like that, and you want to like appreciate the highbrow stuff, but there's just something so innately funny about a dick in a window, and it's just like him going over and not realizing it's there. It's so funny because, and it's
It's
at
in
the
now.
audience.
It's inside the
Yeah.
vehicle now.
And as the audience, you're not expecting it either because there hasn't really been anything like that up to this point in the movie. And then when it just shows up, it's so funny.
And the windows moving.
Yep. It's there is something really just deep and viscerally funny about all this really, just like we said, like dumb humor, but it's not a insult at all because I love it's smart dumb humor. And
Yeah.
and you brought up Tim Meadows. I'll just say, if I had a nickel for every smart, dumb comedy, fake movies with music in it, or the music is actually incredible, and Tim Meadows plays a great supporting role, I would have 2 nickels, which is not a lot, but it's weird that it's happened twice. And I've
What was the
covered
other
both of
one?
them now. There was Walk Hard. He's also in Walk Hard because
That's
he's the
awesome.
guy who's just like, and you never paid for drugs, not once.
He was kicked out of his group. Tony, 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 Tony?
Tony?
And
Yeah.
ending the last one with a question mark was kind of probably a mistake, and it just shows his disappear. And it's like, oh, turns out not Tony. No fourth Tony. Can we talk about the finale of the movie?
Yes, please.
Because this is a movie that, like I said, is not perfect.
Hmm.
A lot of the jokes will probably not land for you. I think more land than not.
Hmm.
I'm smiling almost the entire time. And then it culminates in this moment where Connor learns that he was going to perform 2 songs at the Poppy Awards, but now they only have room for one, right?
Hmm.
So do you want to do a Connor song or a Style Boys song, which is the friends he's just reunited with? And there's this long funny part where like the aide working behind stage, like, okay, he's looking off to the friends. I think he's gonna choose. Nope, he's looking at me again. I think he's gonna do the Connor song. He's not indicating what he's doing. He's really chewing on this. He's really taking his time. And so then it cuts to Connor on stage and he's singing a soulful remix of Finest Girl, aka the Fuck Bin Laden song, where his girl wanted she wants to be fucked harder than the U.S. government fucked Osama bin Laden. And Derek, that joke, I hope my students don't hear this, but that wouldn't land for them. Osama bin
Right.
Laden is not someone that they remember the moment that we got bin Laden.
Hmm.
But so then he pivots from his soulful remix of the F bin Laden song into the Style Boy song,
Hmm.
the Incredible Thoughts with Michael Bolton. And the friends have reunited. Harry is playing his awful saxophone off key. So you realize, like, that's why he got kicked out of his band. He's not a good musician. But the moment when all the performers and the backup dancers freeze, and then Usher just undulates up from the background with a Style Boy shirt
Yeah.
and joins them in the donkey roll, it's like, fuck yeah! How did this movie stick the landing? I didn't even know this movie was flying anywhere, but I
Hmm.
adore that final performance and song as just. I just feel like with that number ending it, even if you didn't like this movie, you're probably not frowning at it.
Yeah, and the cherry on top, which is what I was talking about before, where the movie zigs, is they after they finish that, they're all jovial, and then the lady who was like, and he's doing this now, and he's doing this now, the producer lady, she just starts making out with Lawrence, and they're just like, oh, whoa, didn't see that coming, and it's just like it's
And
another example of the movie just like doing something weird and off the wall that's really funny.
yeah, yeah, and like it's because and that's another joke that probably won't land because every movie in the 80s and I feel like a lot of the 90s,
Hmm.
background characters would just kiss like in end of Ghostbusters, like everyone's just there's
Yeah.
women throwing at them, and I love them addressing it, being like, do they even know each other? Look at her go, and why is Deborah from Aquaspin back there? It's just so stupidly funny. A joke that I didn't realize before was when his turtle Maximus dies,
Hmm.
right? Very abruptly and it's a sad scene. He can't get his turtle to the vet because the paparazzi are at his gate.
Hmm.
And he gives it like a Viking funeral in like a frat party pool scene. But that means that Maximus the turtle's soggy bone syndrome was real. And that's what eventually got him.
Oh shit.
I
Yeah.
think. Anyway,
Yeah.
but they
Yeah.
never explain what happened to Max. I was like, it's soggy bone syndrome.
Soggy bone syndrome. And then I realized like, oh cool, the movie ends with a Maximus 2, and I'm like, we're about to get a Gladiator 2, which if you think about it, the reason
Oh,
he would
that's
have named him
funny.
Maximus, this comes out in 2016, so 16
Right.
years earlier in 2000, he would have been about the right age that he would have just seen Gladiator probably, so that's why he named his turtle Maximus. So I thought that
That's
was interesting.
hilarious.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Uh,
weirdly timely.
right, right.
Yeah.
So switching gears a little bit because I wanted to ask you because the other we talked about how Justin Timberlake obviously is sort of a inspiration for Connor for real. I think there was one other big inspiration for the Style Boys. Are you at all a fan of the Beastie Boys?
I honestly not really, but I knew enough of them that I could
Mhm.
laugh along with the movie.
Right,
So,
because
I'm guessing you are a Beastie Boy.
I'm a very big Beastie Boys fan. They're absolutely one of my favorite groups of all time. And so I don't think there's anything that's like really explicitly like oh like other than like the iconography, the fact that it's like these three dudes who like started as kind of like almost they seemed like more like punk rock, but then they become like more rappers and stuff like that, and or vice versa. So it was just like I was like, okay, these guys are very Beastie Boys coded. They're kind of these
Yeah.
white dorks, in a culture that is more dominated by black music. So I was like, yeah, and like even like the Style Boys and stuff like that. I was like, as a really big fan of the Beastie Boys, and the late great MCA would obviously be somebody who would go into producing like film and stuff like that, like I can never pronounce the word oscilloscope records, which
Yeah.
also like made a lot of great indie produced a lot of great indie movies. So I was just like, as a Beastie Boys fan, it was similar to like watching Walk Hard, being a fan of Johnny Cash, like
Yeah.
watching this as a fan of the Beastie Boys.
Yeah, there's a certain joy that's derived from the thing you love getting parodied.
Right,
Because then
absolutely.
then you're in on the joke, and
Hmm.
you're laughing at yourself, really. And I'm looking. I've never really looked at the Beastie Boys. I've heard their music, but I never really looked at them style wise. And you're right. Well, Lonely Island, I think, is clearly inspired by the Beastie Boys.
Oh yeah, and a
You
lot
know,
all the Style Boy stuff, like Connor for Real stuff doesn't really, but the Wild or the Style Boy stuff sounds like the Beastie Boys. It sounds,
yeah,
especially that like early stuff, like pre
hmm
Paul's Boutique. It's you're like, oh, yeah, like with the beats and stuff like that. You're like, I can really hear it.
yeah, 100%. I bought the vinyl this morning for like $60, and I normally
Oh,
like to
nice.
go like, yeah, it's a little more than I wanted to spend because it's like I like to get used records. I think that's really
Mhm.
fun because
Yeah,
I
yeah.
like looking at it and I like imagining the previous person who owned it and
Mm,
like who else had this exact record in life. I don't know if that's douchey or
yeah.
not, but I panicked because
Still,
when I saw that there was 8 of these left. There was 8 left on Amazon. I'm like, this movie didn't do well. They're probably never reprinting this.
yeah.
And I can't imagine they printed that many, so I have to scoop this up. But if you look on Amazon, the Style Boys vinyl, it's Style Boys. It's not Popstar. It's made to
Mhm.
look like the first Style Boys album, and like Style Boys is listed as the musician. So I don't
That's
know.
cool.
Yeah, I
That's the
don't
kind
know.
of
This
shit I
movie's
love.
fun.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I really love when something is feels like it's like I would much rather wear like you say like a Style Boy shirt than like a pop
yeah,
star shirt. Or something. And this is something that like I wouldn't have up to date now. But when I was a kid, I had a poster for not Harry Potter but Hogwarts. I have
yeah.
or like I talked about The Office. I have a shirt that says like it's like a the Fun
Thunder
Run
Mifflin.
shirt.
Oh, okay.
The
Yeah.
Michael Scott's like cure for the like run for the cure or whatever. So I really love that. Now I want to get like I'm talking myself into trying to buy a Style Boy shirt now, like because I think that would
Oh,
be
you
so
should.
cool to have.
Well,
I
because
just
then
like
anyone who recognizes it, like they're an ally. Like okay,
hmm.
like, you're a pop star stan.
Exactly. Like last year at Comic Con, I saw somebody with like a hockey jersey. And I was like, "What team is that?" And I look closer. I'm like, "The Chiefs." I'm like, and it said Hanson on the back. I was like,
Clerks.
"Oh my
Is it
god, that
Clerks?
it's one of my favorite movies, Slapshot." It's the Hanson
Okay.
brothers from Slapshot, and I was like, "Oh, that's
Oh,
amazing."
that's
Yeah, I
fun.
I dig stuff like that. But I don't know. You got anything in your incredible copious notes there that you wanted to go over here before we wind things down? Because I you got a lot of good stuff there. I can tell.
I mean, we kind of hit it a lot. I just think
Okay.
like the music is just genuinely good. There's so
Yep.
many fun celebrity cameos. There's so many little jokes that, like you said, it kind of zigs where you would expect it to zag. I don't know. I don't know why this movie isn't more celebrated. And I would also, in addition to like a Style Boy shirt, I would love if they sold some of the horses he was drawing when he was at his lowest point. He
Yeah.
did these drawings of horses and sold them on eBay for like $11 a piece. And I don't know if you're much of an artist by hand, but like the way he was trying to draw the horses and clearly had no artistic talent
Yeah.
whatsoever, it just really hit.
Yeah.
And for this movie to be so bombastic and so over the top, but still the jokes feel relatable somehow.
Hmm.
I don't know. I really think it accomplishes a lot, and I'm probably giving it too much credit, but I think it aged better than I expected. And if you're amused by it, so Mike sent me a link. There is a Letterboxd account. I don't know if you can put it in the show notes.
Hmm.
It's someone on Letterbox has given their name is Popstar22. That's the
Hmm.
username on Letterboxd. Every review they do is a Popstar quote. It's a quote from this movie, and they've done it for like over 50 different movies. It's pretty hilarious.
That's that's pretty great. I love a good letterboxed thing like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that'll be in the notes for anybody to check out the show
I don't know
notes.
who this person is, but whoever you are, you're a genius. And maybe you'll find this episode because you clearly like Popstar.
Yep, yep. And I guess the one last thing that I'll say is you brought it before. This is a short movie, and it's a movie that it feels like it doesn't overstay its welcome. And I think
Yeah.
that sometimes that is really invaluable. Because don't get me wrong, I love a movie that's like 3 hours long if it's like a truly epic movie. But for something like this, it's listed as 86 minutes. It gets in, it hits you with some jokes, and it gets out. And I'm like, that is exactly perfect for this. And I'm really curious as to because Apatow is so known for like his productions are so known for being very improvised and stuff like that. Whereas the Lonely Island is kind of the opposite. They have all their songs. They would do all the scripted stuff on SNL. So I feel like for like an Apatow movie, which I love them, but they can get kind of long. It was
Yeah.
nice to have one that was more truncated, a lot felt like a lot less. We're just gonna riff on this one joke for 15, just have Paul Rudd and like Seth Rogen just like play video games like for like 10 minutes or whatever, just have some comedy gold come out. But at the end of the day, it's like, what was that? So I really appreciate the brevity in this movie, because like last night when I went to watch it, I was like, cool, pop this on, play some Majora's Mask, then I still got plenty of time, like it was great.
Yeah, it's you got to respect a tight 90. Anytime a movie takes up only an hour and a half of your time, I mean, I'm just so much more likely to just enjoy myself. It's like a 90-minute movie can only be so bad. So it's
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
what were you gonna do with that 90 minutes? Go watch Popstar. You're gonna laugh and you're gonna smile and you might discover your new favorite song because it's just really, really good. And I hope that every Brooklyn Nine-Nine fan, I think there's a lot of do you like Brooklyn Nine-Nine?
Oh, I love Brooklyn
I
Nine-Nine.
love it too. I absolutely love it. And I think Andy Samberg as an actor figured out his sweet spot in that series
Hmm.
because you have Jake Peralta who is ridiculous but also like very heartwarming and very touching and loyal to
Hmm.
his coworkers and his loved ones. And so you can kind of get behind the character in a way you never can with Connor. But it's just I don't know, man, Popstar. I'm
Yeah.
so happy I got to talk to you about it because it deserves more love. And after this episode, maybe it'll get another viewing.
Hopefully,
That's all I would
hopefully. Yep,
that's all I
yep,
want.
yep. I mean, I think my mom will probably watch it after. I don't know,
Yes.
actually. She might not.
Oh, the terrible photographer. I'm just kidding, Derek's mom. Okay. I'm just kidding. Your picture did not win the Pokemon Snap competition, but that's more Derek's fault than yours.
Fair, fair. I'll take that one on. I'll take that one on. But yeah, one final question before we wrap up. We talked about how great of a mockumentary this is. Do you have any other favorite mockumentaries that you want to mention?
Yeah, I would say if you haven't seen A Mighty Wind, like I said, that's
Mhm.
the Christopher Guest folk song one. That one is hilarious and also just genuinely very touching.
Mhm.
It has a very strong emotional core that I think a lot of mockumentaries don't often have. And my wife and I just sort of discovered it during the pandemic. Did you ever watch any documentary now?
I fucking love documentary now. It is brilliant. Oh my
Yeah,
god.
it's like the series, and every episode is a parody of a different type of documentary.
Mhm.
So like there's a Grey Gardens parody episode, and the one I'm referring to is Gentle and Soft, the story of the Blue Jeans Committee,
That
Fred Armisen and Bill Hader.
that episode legit made my dad cry. Like,
Right?
yeah, it's because he's a musician from back in the day, and it's like really funny, but it's also like really good. Like that whole show is like really funny and heartfelt and good. Like I always think of that one, The Eye Doesn't Lie. That's like kind of, I guess, it's like the true crime one about like
Mm.
the cop who's just like, I knew what I saw. Like gets into some really good stuff. But yeah, I adore documentary now. Like feels so like it's one of the, just like this one. It's something that feels like this is like could be a real documentary. There, everyone parodies a specific documentary or documentary style. Can't recommend it enough. I think it's all on Netflix, so like binge it, people.
Yeah.
It's so good. A couple others that I'd throw out. I mentioned This Is Spinal Tap, which if you're looking for a music mockumentary, can't beat that. And the TV show is really popular now, but I also want to throw out the movie of What We Do in the Shadows,
Mm.
Taika Waititi's vampire mockumentary. It is it does, and because it's just a TV show, it's not or it's just a movie, it's not a TV show. It doesn't strain the credulity as much. It's really funny. It's
Yeah.
very, very good. It's got some. I don't know. It just really feels like it captures the all the tropes and everything that you see in all these real life docs and stuff like that, and also parodies vampire and supernatural movies in a really smart way too. So I love Taika. I even love Thor 4. I'm like one of the 4 people in the world who actually enjoyed
Thor
that movie.
4?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a good movie. It's not terrible. It's not as good as Thor 3, but
What I love so much about your podcast, is that I think people too often play this game of like, oh, I like Popstar. Oh, well, it's not as good as Spinal Tap. And it's like, what do you want there to be 10 movies? You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
I can never have another dinosaur movie because Jurassic Park is just unbeatable. It's just like
exactly.
there has to be room in your heart for silly, stupid, sloppy movies that just show you something you didn't expect and just make you laugh and smile. And I don't know. I hope you have me back because
Oh,
I have a lot of
absolutely.
other underrated movies like on your list I want to be a part of. This is so good.
Well, thank you for the kind words. I really appreciate it. And yeah, I'm obviously gonna have you back. But before I do that, if you want to let the people know about your show.
Yes, please. So, like I said, I'm one half of the Old Switcheroo podcast. We are researching and reviewing every Nintendo Switch Online retro catalog game, which means a lot of games from the 90s and early 2000s. We work really hard on it to do the research and make like the YouTube videos. So please check it out. And if you have a passion for an old game, the www.theoldswitcharoo.com, AROO.com. There's a link to our Discord. We'd love you to join our little community. It's not very big, but we're having fun with it. And we'd love you to have you as a guest on our show if there's a game in that service that you're passionate about. And we will have an upcoming episode with Derek. He introduced me to Karosh from the KGP show, and we talked about a couple of Kirby games. So I'm obviously, if you're listening to this, you're probably a fan of Derek. Who isn't? So if you're a fan of Derek and you're also a Kirby fan, you got to come check out our season 3 episode with Derek and Karosh.
Yeah, thank you. I had a blast with that. Should be dropping about a month after this one comes out, so stay tuned for that. Listen to and like all the stuff you were saying. I love that you guys are like taking this deep dive and looking at all of these great games, because I wouldn't have played those Kirby games necessarily. Like I
Yeah.
love Kirby, I'd never played any one of the ones that came out before Crystal Shards, so it's really cool getting to go back and examine these hidden gems, and kind of take a look at them with a fine-tooth comb, because I talk about movies all the time and I love video games, and it gave me a chance to kind of talk about my other passion as well. So that was really cool. So thank you.
It was great having you.
Well, thank you. But yeah, anybody out there who's listening, who has come over and listening to this for the first time because you guys are fans of JMO and the Old Switcheroo, hope you guys stick around, listen to some more episodes. Just wrapped up recently a mini-series, which Karosh was on the last episode, called Extended Edition, where I talked about director's cuts of films that were a little bit underrated, directors or extended cuts of films. You can also check out my Patreon, or Underrated's Patreon, patreon.com/underrated movie podcast, where I do a sports film podcast called Underdogs, where once a month I review a sports movie, one that isn't underrated. And then I do a couple other things whenever there's a new Marvel thing that comes out in theaters, or on Disney Plus, I guess. I do a Infinity Stones and Dragon Bones is the name of that podcast. By the time you're listening to this, the Deadpool and Wolverine episode is out. That one came out already, so go listen to that. I got a really cool guest for that one. And then I do another podcast on the opposite Mondays of this one. This one comes out on one Monday. On the other Monday, it's Midnight Film Society, where me and my buddy Damien talk about just kind of more generally about films, what we've been watching. Summer movies right now is like a lot of the stuff we're talking about. That's a ton of fun. Check out Underrated Movie Podcast on all the socials, just Underrated Movie Podcast everywhere, or go to underratedmoviepodcast.com, and that's got a link to all the stuff we're talking about. Thank you, everybody, for listening. Thank you one more time to JMO for coming on. This has been a blast. I'll catch you guys all.